J'ai vu New York, New York, USA. J'ai vu New York, New York, USA. J'ai jamais rien vu d'eau, j'ai jamais rien vu d'aussi haut. C'est au New York, New York, USA. J'ai vu New York, New York, USA. J'ai vu New York, New York, USA. J'ai jamais rien vu d'eau, j'ai jamais rien vu d'aussi haut. C'est au New York, New York, USA. Empire State Building, Rockefeller Center, International Building, Waldorf Astoria, Pan American Building, Bank of Manhattan. J'ai vu New York, New York, USA. J'ai vu New York, New York, USA. J'ai jamais rien vu d'eau, j'ai jamais rien vu d'aussi haut. C'est au New York, New York, USA. Diamond Life Building, Americana Hotel, CBS Building, RCA Building, First National City Bank.
The kids have to be told and they have to understand that from now on, should you commit a crime, you will not be treated with kid gloves.
This is a policeman. He claims he likes kids, but thinks we should be stricter with them.
That you will go to court, that after a fair trial, if you're found guilty, you will receive the maximum punishment, so that then we'll have a 1-2 punch. These young punks and these young hoods wouldn't be getting away the way they think they can.
All right. Listen of attention. All right. Listen of attention. I think very often the policeman comes to believe that a war is what he's engaged in, and wars are to win.
This is an attorney. He claims he likes policemen, but not their attitudes.
And that wars are not won by Marquis of Queensberry rules, and that what he's concerned with is the end result, and not the way it's obtained.
As part of its continuing America's Crises series on cities, National Educational Television examines crime in the streets. Tonight we look at two aspects of the problem: the rehabilitation of boys who commit more than 50% of all street crime, and the police whose job it is to protect us from them.
This is America, 1966, where only the brave walk alone in the parks. And many homes have become garrisons. And where business is booming generally, and especially in fancy alarm devices.
Good morning, madam. May I help you?
Yes, indeed. I need something that would attract a lot of attention. What can you show me?
I think I have the very solution for you. This is one of the best. It's called Invento Alarm. It's one of our best. It's very, very loud, which you'll find out. It makes a very loud noise. Sounds like a real ferry whistle.
Are these cans replaceable?
Yes, those are replaceable. $2 each.
What is that tie clip with a gun?
That's a real gun. It's all cocked to go off. You know, this also comes with little pellets that you use. It also comes with cuff links.
Does that shoot?
Yes, it shoots.
Oh, my.
It comes with little pellets that you show like this.
Oh, my.
But crime is increasing and the danger is real. A result of growing population, lack of jobs, and the changes taking place in our cities. Old neighborhoods are changing. For many people, the change is for the worse.
And I've been around Manhattan for many years. I don't think it's safe anymore. It seems to be that all the neighborhoods have been changing. So I'm gonna move to mill basing now.
Well, the problem, I think, is really the business is slowing down because all the junkies are coming in. And they come in and they sell all kinds of junk, and the business just drops dead. For example, this business right here lost $1,500. People come in here and they sell them. The people just, they come around, sit in the counters. They don't buy anything. And the other people see that, they just don't come in. They make a racket out of coming in bathrooms. They sell in there. They have a business, a great business doing that, but they shouldn't do it. And they know they shouldn't do it, but they still do it. And the cops don't say anything.
What do you mean the cops don't say anything?
Well, the cops, just not that many cops around here. They just don't come in here and don't check on the business usually like the way they're supposed to come in. Regularly, they don't come in. They just stand on the corner and just watch. They should come in more into the business and find out what's going on.
The police are always the first to be blamed when the crime rate goes up. Though they are attempting to combat the increase in crime, they have not been particularly successful. And in 1964, less arrests were made than in 1963. This decline in police efficiency can be attributed partly to a shortage of men. Most cities are below their quota and are finding recruiting increasingly difficult. It's hard to blame a man for not wanting to be a policeman. We give them very little respect and even less money. The head of New York's 27,000-man Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, Patrolman John Cassese.
There's no sense in being a policeman today for the wages that we get today and all the abuse that we have to take when a fellow can go in outside industry and do as well, if not better, without all the brickbats and without all the other ramifications that go with being a policeman. Plus the fact that probably on his other job, he works all day work, whereas as a policeman, he'd have to put in 2/3 of his time at night on a midnight tour and on a 4 to 12 tour.
Another problem is the misuse of the men we do recruit. We train them to catch criminals and then use them to direct traffic as clerks or switchboard operators. All jobs which could be performed equally well by police women or civilians, freeing the men for law enforcement.
May I help you? Yes, ma'am.
And most police departments are still using antiquated equipment.
Yes, ma'am. What's the address? Yes, ma'am. We'll send you an ambulance right away.
The heart of any law enforcement agency is the communication center. Yet in many departments, the time it takes a call to reach them, be written up, relayed to a dispatcher, and broadcast to a car can be costly and even fatal. And we still rely too heavily on the foot patrolman. Chicago's Superintendent of Police, O.W. Wilson.
The most inefficient mode of transportation is walking. And we simply can't afford to have policemen walking. And as we increase their salaries, the need for conserving their time, not wasting it in walking from the location of one police task to that of another, must clearly be avoided.
About face. First rank.
Chicago is the only major city in the United States to show a significant decrease in crime over the past 2 years. This is due mostly to Wilson's modernization of the police force, making it more mobile and updating it technologically. Chicago also has a shortage of men, but Wilson counteracted this by taking all his men off the footbeats and placing them in brightly painted cars. They are conspicuous and seem to be everywhere. The cars are linked to a $2 million communication center, the most modern in the world.
1915, 10-4, another.
It handles 5,000 calls a day.
Chicago Police, Officer Miller. You're on Walcott now?
Yeah. Okay, that's a tough one from a truck, right?
What's your location, 1903?
Using this map, a dispatcher can tell instantly which car is closest to the scene of a crime in progress and dispatch it within 30 seconds of receiving the call. Not too long ago, a Chicagoan might wait 2 to 3 hours for a policeman to respond to an emergency call. Today, a car is usually on the scene within 2 to 3 minutes.
It's 22 years old, man.
Wilson thinks that if he were to use men on foot to provide the service he's providing today, he would need a force of not just 13,000 men, but more than 100,000 men. The computer is another important factor in Chicago's declining crime rate. Daily, it is fed all crime data. It digests it and predicts crime patterns. If, based on the data it receives, the computer decides some areas will have a higher crime rate than others, more cars are sent to that area.
I'd like to check out an Illinois 65, Robert Nora, 8535, on a 65 Chevy for Hackett Cove.
Henry Boy, 8347, Illinois.
It is also being used to store other types of information and aid in arrests. The license number of the man's car is called into the communication center and fed into the computer through an electric typewriter. On the memory drum of this computer are filed the names and records of 90,000 persons and vehicles. Within seconds, the machine checks the license number and finds that the car has been reported stolen and relays the information back to the police.
Longfellow.
223.
We have a hot one. 1014 machine has a hot one.
Thank you very much, sir. That car is hot.
But even if all police departments were as modern as Chicago's, it would not be enough. For the number one problem for police today is to get along with the non-white minorities of the city.
We announce to the police that we will be here so that they can adequately protect the grouping. We think that it's important that the city of New York also be aware of the way the police handles the crowd in a white area and handle the crowd in the ghetto areas of Harlem or Bedford-Stuyvesant. And these things we feel are necessary.
This distrust of policemen has led Negroes to ask for civilian review boards. The police say such boards would lower police morale and efficiency. In the few cities in which they have been tried, the results are inconclusive. The cop on the beat is inclined to blame non-whites for the increase in crime. But criminologists note that the vast majority of Negroes, like whites, are law-abiding, and only a small percentage of non-whites ever come into contact with the law. It is true, however, that Negroes are responsible for a disproportionate share of crime in the cities. But a high crime rate has always been a product of the slums. Before the Negroes and other non-whites, it was the European immigrants who were responsible for street crime. However, they were able to work their way out. The Negro and Puerto Rican finds this increasingly difficult. And too often, the police only add to their frustration. Harold Rothwax, counsel for New York's Mobilization for Youth.
The policeman comes in and he is not, like so many other social agencies, concerned with change, with improving the lot of the poor. He's concerned with imposing order. He's not concerned with motive. He's concerned with peace. He becomes a symbol, I suppose, of society. It's indifference to the real problems of the people in the community. And they focus for those problems because he's the one who administers the force. He's the one who locks people up, who very often is brutal in a gratuitous way. I think very often the policeman comes to believe that a war is what he's engaged in, and that wars are to win, and that wars are not won by Marquis of Queensberry rules, as Police Commissioner Murphy said, and that what he's concerned with is the end result, and not the way it's obtained.
The riots in Harlem and Watts were touched off by incidents involving the police. Since the riots, some people say they see a change in police attitude toward the poor. Not Mr. Rothwax.
Still a war. I don't think those riots change anything but the rhetoric that accompanies that war. Change anything but the vocabulary in which we discuss it. Changes anything but the platitudes with which we surround our attitudes. I don't think anything has happened to change this war, and I think primarily that's because, to a large extent, there is a curtain over the facts. I think the facts are that police indifference to the dignity and to the rights of people in poor neighborhoods, members of minority groups, inhabitants of ghetto areas, are quite extensive. I don't say they prevail. I don't say they are practiced by most of the people on the beat, but I say that a considerable percentage of policemen are engaged in gratuitous indignities to these people.
One of the problems is police training. Less than 25% of all departments require as much as 200 hours of training before giving a man a gun and placing him on the street. And most of the training that is given consists of dull lectures and routine police practice. Except for a handful of departments, there is no attempt made to give recruits any understanding of the city's problems.
Position of the feet is good. Balance yourself. Balance. Your head is dropping, following your hand.
Gets in trouble with
Another problem is the attitude of the average policeman. We asked Mr. Cassese whether he thought policemen understood the problems of minority groups in the city today.
Surely, no doubt about it. We've been educated in our own police department. We take several courses, a little Spanish course, a public relations, community relations course on how to treat these people, and I think we do very well.
We are men of bias, and I am as biased as you are.
This is a recruit training course at the New York City Police Academy. New York is one of the departments which is attempting to make recruits aware of social problems. Yet only 8 of the recruits' 400 hours of training are spent listening to lectures on community relations. The speaker is Community Relations Counselor Joseph Maniscalco.
It is my job to work with you and with the community, to understand that your feelings are the feelings of any other citizen of ours, apprehensive about the changes taking place in our city, not understanding the reason for the vehement civil rights demonstrations because we essentially are middle class, we're white. In this room, I believe we're all white. We do not have the kinds of problems that non-whites have in the city.
How effective do you think these courses are?
Pretty good.
In what way?
Well, I think that it brings about a better understanding of the population, and our men put it to good use.
One day, why do we invite the Negroes to come to the city? Why do we tell them to come up from Birmingham, Alabama, and live here and collect relief?
Just speaking from experience up in Harlem, now you go into their house. I've had the pleasure, if you want to call it that, of walking into the
But attitudes are hard to change. After the class, we selected 10 recruits and asked them their opinions of the non-white minorities they would be serving.
Everybody takes a certain amount of pride in their home. And now, excluding the slumlord, excluding the possibility that he is at fault, your own pride would dictate that your living conditions should be in accordance with your own pride.
No, it has nothing to do with pride, with personal pride, because they just don't know any better.
I think they do.
No,
I think they're well aware.
They're talking about the conditions.
They're exposed to all these conditions.
They've seen the outside world.
Don't put them like there's gates around Harlem.
They know what other people live like.
They know what other people live like, but
they're saying there's a lack of sanitation, a lack of service. What happens when a service is restored? When a person does get into one of these slum clearance projects, so the person goes into the project and the same thing happens. Here's a clean apartment. It's given to him brand new, fresh, clean.
Why should he destroy it?
Beautiful hallways, beautiful elevators. It's hard to say. If you haven't experienced it, it's hard to say. You know, we can...
Because I want to look for it.
But you can't say that. As a colored person, they might not find it.
I got high school education, so all I went to was rights.
We can sit here and knock it around like crazy and pounce it down. It won't be the first time it's done. It won't be the last time it's done. We're not black. We don't experience it, and it's hard to say. I say give him a chance. I'll find out. I mean, I can get kicked in the teeth. Now what are you giving them a chance? You're giving them a chance here, and you tell me everything that you got against them. You're giving them a chance.
When I was 18 years old, I was in the Marines. When I was 19, I was back from Okinawa in the Philippines. when I was 20 when I was out, 3 years in. And I come out and I see these guys don't even want to work. What, are they kidding me?
They're entitled to the same opportunities that we have. I don't say go give them out of your pocket what you want. No. But the same thing, the way you want to be respected, the same way they actually have to be respected.
Fine, but if I'm sitting in this group and I'm rejected by the group, I know enough to get up out of my chair and leave.
Right, Hank.
But the Negro will sit here and keep telling you, I am good, you got to accept me.
Dean of Criminology at the University of California, Joseph Lohman.
First of all, I think policemen have got to know that the term police-community relations is not just some kind of public relations gimmick to make people feel that, well, they're good guys and they're thoughtful and concerned about us. I think what we've got to make the police aware of with appropriate educational experiences is this new context, to divorce them and dissociate themselves from their traditional notions, indicate that a man's private views are one thing, but as a police officer, he has the responsibility and obligation of addressing the community as a police officer, which is, in terms of its intrinsic character and quality, irrespective of his own private notions and views. And this isn't easy to come to, but it's something that we have to address as an educational task.
Many police chiefs would like to recruit better men by raising police standards. However, many departments don't even require a high school diploma. If we want better men, we're going to have to treat police work as a profession and pay them as such. However, professionalizing police work is only one of the things we're not doing that we should do to combat crime. In fact, we rely too heavily on the police. More of our time and money could be spent working with kids. Although most juvenile delinquents do not become criminals, almost all criminals started as juvenile delinquents.
The man was on his waterman truck, and he said something to him. So he ran up there and hit the man, knocked him off the truck. The man hit out in the street, and blood was shooting on out his nose. And you know them guys that cut the watermelon? He pulled a knife out of the side of that big barrel, and was going to jump off the truck and cut him. So I hit him. You know, I ran over there and hit him.
Juvenile delinquency is really the most serious aspect of the crime problem. Kids under 18 are responsible for about half of the serious crime in the United States, and they are the fastest growing segment of our population. Psychologist Saul Pilnick explains part of the problem.
We've created a problem for adolescents in that we've become a highly technical society. There was a time, maybe 50 years ago, when youngsters would grow up with their families and their fathers would teach them the trade, and maybe at the age of 15 or 16 they would become an adult. But the skill that's required for a youngster to become an adult now demands intensive education, so that we have created an elastic period of adolescence, an expansion of this period. Consequently, we now have a pool of youngsters in our society who are waiting to become adults. Middle-class youngsters who have every opportunity to go to college, middle-class youngsters who can emulate their fathers and use them as models and their mothers as models, have this chance of seeing that adulthood waits around the corner. However, the youngster that comes from what we now call the socially disadvantaged group don't have that opportunity. They look to the future in a very hopeless fashion, and they become young people who live for today and keep the promise of tomorrow pushed out of their minds. So I think delinquency is very much related to this question of providing opportunities for youngsters. Those who don't have the opportunity to wait until tomorrow can train them to become young adults begin to look for pleasure immediately. And then you find the stealing of cars and drinking, the use of barbiturates, anything for kicks.
The majority of kids Dr. Pilnick referred to as socially disadvantaged come from non-white minority groups. They have the highest dropout rate and an unemployment rate 5 times higher than whites their age. Not surprisingly, juvenile delinquency is often 5 times higher in slum neighborhoods than in the rest of the city. Though we should be working with these children at a very early age, it is not until they get in trouble that we attempt to do anything for them. The executive director of the Citizens Committee for Children, Mrs. Truda Lash, explains what happens to a boy after he's arrested.
Well, very often, of course, he goes to court and the judge puts him on probation. I think that's the usual thing, if his case is not dismissed altogether. And then he's on probation. Then the question is, what does he really need? What's really the trouble with him? Sometimes a good probation officer can really give a young person enough to keep him straight. Sometimes, however, probation officer has too many youngsters on his caseload, and he can't see a young person enough, so that it becomes another disappointment. Somebody who might have done something, who couldn't, not through his own fault, because he didn't have the time. And then the young person gets angrier and probably gets into trouble again and comes to court again. And this time, of course, it's more serious. See, and quite often then, the decision has to be made because of the lack of family of the youngsters, the lack of support at home, the fact that he's also a truant in school, to commit him, that is, to send him away from home. Then the big problem comes where? And no matter what the young person needs, in most cases, a delinquent boy and girl end up at a training school.
This is the Ferris School for Boys in Wilmington, Delaware, considered one of the nation's better training schools. 130 boys are here for offenses ranging from truancy to robbery. Its director, Mr. Caleb Warrington.
Sometimes just the initial shock of being committed to an institution is enough. And we feel that those boys, we evaluate them in our progress review, and we send them home after 4 or 5 weeks. But then I'd say the average length of our stay here now is probably around 6 months. Now, we do have some boys that go into 9 months and a year, and some run over. I would say, basically, most of the boys that come here need love. I think, really, a delinquency, I think it comes from a lack of love. A lack of love, a father or a parent or a mother, maybe they don't love a boy or a girl enough, maybe to spank them. But I think it all comes from a lack of love, and that's why most of the kids are here. And that's when they get involved with the law.
We have them the first day, you know, they come. We have them, we teach them to keep themselves clean, you know, to brush their teeth, to comb their hair, you know, to stay straight, you know, to do the things you're supposed to be doing, and to help them. Most of these boys have never worked, you know, and a lot of them don't know how to take care of themselves when they come here. We see to it that they brush their teeth, they get to bed at the right time, and this and that and the other meals. And most of them never done any work until they come here, you know, and this is not really work, it's something to keep them busy, to train them that they are such things as work. Most of them have the feeling, you know, they want something for nothing. They think they don't have to work for it.
I think that, Mr. Duck.
Our nation is our national
Most of the boys that come here are academically retarded, 2 or 3 grade levels. But when they go back, we have usually raised their grade level by 1 or 2 grades, and they are able to compete in the same class that they have in the public school system.
After the battle, Perry sings his famous message. We have met the enemy and they are ours. The American ship.
We'll count up about 10 seconds and release it. Express. Now see how nice that is? Now you do your sleeve. Here. Straighten it out, keep it smooth. They pay them a salary, yes. How much they get? Well, they get so much per hour, or per shift rather. It's 15 cents per shift, yes.
Will some of these kids go on and do this kind of work after they get out, do you think?
Well, I'm hoping so. I have had 2 so far that went out and done this type of work.
You know what you're going to be doing when you get out?
Yes, sir.
What?
Working on a tugboat.
Working on where?
Tugboat.
On a tugboat.
Yes, sir.
This kind of work going to help you there?
I don't know, sir. It don't bother me too much. I'm used to hard work.
Son, you're one of the small boys here, right?
Yes, sir.
How long have you been here, man?
5 weeks.
How do you like it so far?
It's all right.
All right?
Yes, sir.
Getting good food?
Yes, sir.
Good food. Well, son, have you talked to your caseworker lately?
Yes, sir.
Who is your caseworker?
It's raw.
Mr. Rao? Well, listen, you put a slip in to see him, and I want you to see him regularly. You try to see him every week now. All right?
Yes, sir.
Are you able to see your brother? He's on campus, too. Are you able to see him?
Yes, sir.
You miss home?
Yes, sir.
You been homesick?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to call your father?
Yes, sir.
When would you like to call him? This afternoon?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'll arrange for your caseworker to call him this afternoon. He was up here this past week when he brought your brother back, and I talked with him, and he explained to me about you being in the Murphy School at Dover, and said that you didn't want to stay there. You ran away and ran home to his house. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Were you ever involved in anything else?
I got in trouble with my brother.
You got in trouble with your brother?
Yes, sir.
What kind of trouble?
We got some cars.
You stole a car?
Yes, sir.
All right, son, send in Alfred Watson. All right?
You signed these?
Yes. Do you have anything else you want to talk to me about?
No one there. If I stay in Ball Cottage.
Stay in Ball Cottage?
Yes, sir.
Son, a time will come, see, when we'll be crowded in Ball Cottage and we have to move boys out to their other cottage. See, you're just there for 5 weeks, but see, you'll be moving over to Grace Cottage. Don't you think you can get along in Grace Cottage?
Yes, sir.
You'll be all right in Grace Cottage. All the boys are about your size, so I feel you'll make out all right over there. If you don't, you come back to see me, all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, son, send in Alfred Watson. Sometimes we have to discipline boys, but never as far as punishment. We believe that they have to work it out. Of course, sometimes we do have occasions when boys are uncontrollable, and we have to use our detention unit in order to control these boys, but this is usually for a short period. Come on right.
Have him out? One of us? Y'all come on in. I'll be around each one of them. Any complaints? Good afternoon.
Everything all right?
Hi. Any complaints? What? You want to...
We have a nurse who we feel that gives the boys the love as a mother. And Mr. Shortle, the administrative assistant, and I also try to give them the fatherly love that a boy needs.
What?
I see he kept giving me headaches, so I told Mr. Carter, I didn't want to take them because I kept getting headaches and bothering me, and other pills didn't help their headaches, so I just waited.
Did you feel better before you were taking the pill?
Yes, ma'am. I've been feeling good all day since I've been taking it.
What are you doing back here, Rick?
Stolen car.
Is that right? Who did you steal the car with?
Bob Derdowski.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Son, what are you doing here?
Well, he
set me up for 30 days.
30 days, yes, sir. How you doing?
All right.
He said put you to work, too, on your 30 days. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
You want to work?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go ahead back in, son. And I see quite a bit of a change in about 3 or 4 months. We have a lot of boys that are aggressive, hostile. When they leave, they act like any ordinary boy. These are cement, built of cement, and mattresses at nighttime go over them. At daytime, we keep the mattresses off because boys sometimes they do get destructive and do tear my mattresses up, don't you? So we keep them off in the daytime and then just give them to them at nighttime. How you boys been doing there, all right? How you doing? You weren't doing too good yesterday. You act like you was mad. Were you mad?
Yes, sir.
Have you calmed down a little bit?
Yes, sir.
You mean you ready to come out? You think you're ready to come out?
I'll let you stay down here though, Mr. Morrison.
Well, we'll let you stay down here a couple more days and see whether you get ready to come out there or not.
Okay.
Okay.
A training school does not really rehabilitate. A training school contains, a training school protects. And one superintendent of the training school once told me, he said, the only thing we can do is that we can teach these young people that there are consequences for certain actions. But you don't have particularly good schools and training schools. They don't get prepared for jobs. It is simply at a period of life, a child is removed from the community. If we see this child, this delinquent person who has broken the law, who may indeed be quite dangerous, as someone whom we are not going to put behind lock and key all his life, then we have to say, what can we do so he's less dangerous? What can we do so that he becomes more convinced that he can do something and that becomes useful to us? So I think we have to train him very hard. If possible, give him a job. If possible, try him out in situations in the community where pressures are on him. The fact that he is not a delinquent in a training school doesn't prove a darn thing. Not to be a delinquent back here is what we have to be sure of.
Back here, for most of the boys we're talking about, is the streets of the ghetto. Training schools don't work because they're understaffed, overcrowded, and because they send a boy back to the streets no better prepared to cope with them than before he was sent away. And even if a boy was prepared to get along on the streets, very little opportunity awaits him when he does return. White middle-class America has moved to the suburbs and left the cities to the very rich and the very poor. And the economic gap between the suburbs and the cities grows greater every year. In the suburbs, children are educated in the home and in the school. In the slums, too often education starts only when a boy cannot cope with school, drops out, and begins life on the streets. Henry Hilton, an East Harlem youth worker, explains what it's like.
A youngster who's been brought up from the South or from Puerto Rico finds out that he's been set back in classes maybe a year or 2 years. When he enters the class, the teachers then realize that actually, from the poor education he's received elsewhere, he might be 4 years behind. He finds out understand that he can't compete in school. He gets into a lot of mischief, he gets put out, or he drops out. After he hits the street, like any other kid anywhere else, he wants to belong. Now, what can he belong to? The gang on the block. This is the only thing he has to belong to. If he goes to the center, this is in the evening, maybe he might not even be allowed in the center if he has a bad enough reputation, you see. So he builds on his reputation in the street. He wants to be the leader. Number banker, the number collector, the dope hustler, pimps. These people show up with the big Cadillacs and the fancy clothes and what have you. The youngster figures that these people didn't finish school, so why do I have to finish school? This is the way I will make it.
I was one that, very seldom went to school, and I was mostly in the street, And you learn how to handle yourself out there after a while. After you get beat up a couple of times, you get stomped a couple of times, you get kicked around. You learn how to handle yourself, The street is rough, man. Why? You got to make it out there. You can't be out there, you see and you don't see, in other words, you can see somebody get killed out there, and you better not open your mouth, For the simple fact that you're going to be next on the list if you do. This is what I meant when I said you see and you don't see, and you hear and you don't hear. As long as nobody bothering you, you mind your business.
For this boy, like most slum kids, life on the streets begins at an early age.
Yeah, I remember the first time I played hooky. I was in 6th grade. Played hooky that first day, and I just ran it in the hole. Kept on and kept on. And couldn't go to school one day without at least had to play hooky too. I just got to the point where I didn't dig school at all, They wasn't doing nothing for me, There was things I wanted, things I needed, So. Like I might see something in one of them store windows, go home, I tell Pops I seen it, tell him how much it costs. Like he might say, well, look son, I gotta pay rent this week, or a little brother need a pair of shoes, or something like this, you gotta wait. You get tired of that, So you get out there and get it the best way you can. Well, I went down, where Brooklyn Bridge subway station is? All them tunnels and whatnot down there. And I stood around down there, and some woman come up out the subway, she walking, swinging her bag like she don't want it. You just run up behind and take it. I stole, but I don't think I stole no more than the average kid, really. Than the average kid that is out here in the street.
Yes, well, I think we should be a little sterner with the children and let them know that you can't get away with this. We're going to treat you a little tougher and a little harsher. And if we did, maybe they'd think twice. But they know before they begin that everything's going for them. As I said before, everybody treats them with kid gloves. And they've got everything going for them. What have they got to lose? Well, they know that we'll get out the next month or 2 months or 6 months, and we'll be doing the same thing, and this happens. You look at the records of some of these kids, arrested for 7, 8, 10 times for the same crime. Now, something's wrong somewhere. We should be getting them when they violate the law and give them the punishment befitting the crime, and let's keep them behind bars where they can do no harm to anybody else.
But Dr. Pilnick thinks the problem is more complex than that, and that we ought to be doing more than just punishing them.
We're really not devoting the time, attention, and money to provide the necessary kinds of programs that youngsters need. The people who work with youngsters don't get the kinds of salaries that people in other areas in our society do. The programs that we establish for youngsters really don't do rehabilitation. Reformatory systems, for example, correctional programs tend to merely be custodial programs. Youngsters who go into reformatories, and this is a well-known fact that everybody bandies about, but very few of us do anything about. Youngsters who go into reformatory systems usually come out far more sophisticated delinquents than when they went in. And part of the problem is that we create a social system or an institution with a group of youngsters who have only to learn from each other. We're not providing the dynamic, the hope, the new opportunities within reformatory systems. My own feeling and my own personal bias is that we need to build as many of the rehabilitation programs as we can outside in the community. Sending kids away from the community, putting them up in the hills somewhere behind walls just doesn't do the job of rehabilitation.
Recently, we've begun to realize that programs, both preventive and rehabilitative, must be concentrated in the community itself. More important, the people of the community must run the programs. This Cadet Corps is one activity of Harlem's United Block Association. It was started by two men living in Harlem. Originally, they went to the kids in the street and organized them into athletic leagues. Today, they offer remedial reading courses and try to help them find jobs. They are taking the kids and giving them, for the first time in their lives, a chance to belong to something besides the gang on the block.
I know the program is doing good in the Puerto Rican area, a hell of a good.
This is Chicago, and a program which is working directly with the gang on the block. This is Carlos Castro, a high school dropout. Just a few years ago, he was part of a fighting gang. Now he's part of the program and is trying to get the gangs to stop fighting. These are the leaders of the gangs in his area.
And if you do, you're going to wind up like Chagin or Pepe. You know, 199 years and 188. You know how long Pepe got. 188, states have a good deal. You know, they gave him a break. Chagin, he's got 199, you know. But now these two guys were buddies, brother. They were friends. They game banged together, they drank together. Chagin ate at Pepe's house. They were tight, brother. They were real mellow, you know. But one day, they went out there and shot that boy.
The program is run by the Chicago YMCA and other community organizations. The original workers were a handful of college-educated outsiders. There are now 500 workers, all of them, like Carlos, indigenous to the neighborhood in which they work.
Basically, the old attached worker program was to stop the gang fight. This was basic.
Hank Bach, one of the leaders of the program.
Hopefully hasten the split up of certain individuals in the group so that the people can function as individuals rather than in group norms. We found that what would happen is we'd work with the group would have a tendency to cool off in a year or two, and they'd take the worker and they'd put him in another neighborhood, and he'd start with another girl. But what you find then in another year or so, you'd have to come back to the same neighborhood, start all over again. So what we're trying to do now is capitalize on the leadership that has been developed in the group and use this leadership in a legitimate sense.
Today, the program has gone far beyond its original objective of pacifying the gangs. It's now helping the boys in many ways, with school, jobs, and recreation. It's successful because the workers are men like Carlos, who understand the boys' problems.
I walked out.
Don't you think about going back to school?
No.
Why?
Working. I'm a working boy.
I know you've been
I'd rather be kicked to death by a grasshopper.
I'm going back to school.
That's right.
Why?
I don't like school.
Are you learning anything in the outside?
Yeah.
Like what?
No comments on the grounds of the Fifth Amendment. No, I don't want to answer that question.
You don't want to answer why you don't like school.
No.
You take a kid from an older group, and let's say the junior group in the neighborhood, and one of the younger guys comes up to him, and the older guy says, hey, Butch, why don't you go steal me a pack of cigarettes? And the young kid says, well, no, man. He says, if I get caught, I'm on probation. I'm going to go back to St. Charles or something like that. And he slaps the kid across the side of the head, and he says, go steal me that pack of cigarettes. And the kid runs over and picks up the pack of cigarettes out of the store and runs back and gives them to the man, and he fawns at his feet, because this is my hero. This is my God in my little neighborhood. All right, now you take that same older guy, and although he may never have graduated from high school, you sell him the story. You make it important to him, the status and the recognition and the identification to something. And he sees the same kid, and he says, hey, Butch, how come you're not in school today? And Butch says, well, man, I didn't feel like going today. And he slaps the kid across the side of the head and says, you go to school. All this is a change in norms. Same kind of behavior.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah. The real answer lies in the indigenous people themselves. Because if it becomes policy of the neighborhood to finish school, then baby, you finish school. This is where it's at.
Kids will listen to other kids who they respect and who are sympathetic to their problems. Based on this idea, a handful of rehabilitation centers have been started right in some communities. One of them, the J. Stanley Shepherd Home in New York City, has 30 boys in its program. This is one of them, Bobby Colon.
Boy, I used to hide all my hatred inside, And anybody that I didn't like, I would see my father's face. One time I got busted. My father hit me, so I went up to Lee Avenue, I took some eggs and went up to Lee Avenue and hit this Jewish man. And he chased us for around 5 blocks, and he finally caught us. I went to court, and I was scared because he was coming after me. So I ripped off an aerial from a car and hit the Jewish man in his face and cut him. He had glasses on. Now that Jewish man didn't do nothing to me, but I saw my father's face,
The Shepherd Home differs from a training school in that the boys live in the community and are pretty much on their own. During the day, they work or go to school. At night, they attend group therapy sessions. The idea is that only kids with similar problems can make a boy face his own and help him solve them. Bobby attends these sessions twice a week. The group knows he has a problem with his father.
I just want to see how he would make up all the things he did to me,
Tonight, he's told them he'd like to leave the program and that he thinks he can now get along with his father.
You came out of the house and you were hanging out and drinking and told you not to drink. Is that one of the things?
Yeah.
Well, how do you think he's going to make it up to you? What do you want him to do? Say, Bob, go ahead and drink as much as you want?
The group thinks Bobby is kidding himself and is pushing him to be realistic.
But what if you do make it up to you, which I doubt? But what if you do? Then what?
Then we just get along better.
Just get along?
This is just me a temporary thing.
Ever since I know my father, every Friday he's drunk.
So he doesn't get drunk one Friday and you think he changed?
No, but he was acting different. I'm just going to give it a try.
Well, let me ask you a question. I don't know if this is the same thing with you, but my mother's mentally disturbed. She's been that way before I was born. I've always hoped that someday that she wouldn't be nuts, and someday that my father would come back. But I never gave up hope until the last time I saw her.
So, Bill, it isn't your mother that's going to change, or your father's going to change, or your home's going to change?
No, it's you. Yeah, that's. But you see, I was always hoping that my mother would change, that my father would change, my stepfather would change. I was hoping that, someday I could go home and I could have a family, I could have someone that cared about me, but the only thing I got was 14 years in homes, you know what I mean?
So it's fantasy.
Yeah, it's fantasy to dream about something that it isn't going to come true. You just have to give up hope. I mean, are you hoping for the same thing?
Yeah.
And you're hoping that just because he didn't get drunk this weekend, that this means he's completely conformed.
I mean, he probably isn't, but I'll take the chance.
You won't be taking no chance. I don't think there'll be any doubt about it. You'll be putting yourself right into a load of trouble.
Right. And I would like to tell him something. Even though I changed and I wanted to go back to my neighborhood, I felt that I had a better outlook on life. But you know what happened? I went back there, I was a changed person. And then I felt that my friends, rejected me. I mean, because, of myself, the way I've changed. And then, in order for me to, to be back in the crowd, I have to change again. Back to my old environment to be, accepted in the group. And that is the same thing that's going to happen to you, even though you don't believe, because I didn't believe it myself. I didn't believe I could go back into that old neighborhood and become the same person I was. I didn't believe it at all.
Are you afraid of that?
It's going to be harder now. It's going to be harder for me to change to what I used to be.
Yes. So,
because I know the penalty now. I know what it's like, and it's just going to be harder.
So, why is it so necessary?
That's just like dope, isn't it?
You'd be surprised how a nice slug of wine, a little more, changes your whole thinking about that penalty.
That's right.
I don't drink like I used to, man.
Is it really so much the penalty again? Is it only the penalty that keeps you the way you are now, Ernie? Only the penalty that keeps you the way you are, Carol? Or is it maybe you found something else? Have you found something else? Are you any much more satisfied with yourself now than you were?
I know. More in life. There's a whole lot of things I never even think of thinking I could do. I was always afraid. I was always afraid that people would reject me. I was afraid what would happen if I do change.
Hey, tell him.
I was going through the same thing.
Kyron, tell him what happened to you, why you grew that beard.
Yes, I grew the beard because I had this long beard, because I was afraid that I was something terrible. And I wanted to hide within myself. Yeah. And I wanted to go back. I was so afraid to change. I was so afraid, what if I do change? How would people accept me? How would I look? I was just afraid.
And now?
How would I be? But now it's a great relief. I know I can do things, and I can do things, and I'm going to do things.
Well, you people don't understand. I just want to get out.
Everybody else does.
All right, so why you handing me so much lip, man?
We have a guy going tonight. I think most of you know who. I think we can look back, and I think we can see a guy who's come a pretty long way in a pretty short period of time.
3 weeks later, the group decided that Bobby was ready to go home on a 1-month trial basis. If he gets along with his family, does well in school, and stays out of trouble on the streets, he'll be allowed to remain at home.
That he can handle himself. There isn't any reason in the world why any guy here can't do with himself and for himself what Bobby did. Not for anybody else, gentlemen. Don't do it for me. It's for you that you're doing it, if you want it. It's your life. You're the one that's going to...
The question is, what awaits him when he leaves? Only half the battle of rehabilitation is with the boy. The other half is with society. Bobby must be accepted, and he must be able to find meaningful work. There must be opportunities available to him.
Hopefully, when a boy leaves here, when Bobby leaves here, he should be at the point where he can deal with...
This is Dick Rachin, who runs the home for the New York State Division for Youth.
Not trying to help a boy reach the point here where when he goes out in the street, he's going to find things laid out for him on a silver platter. This is unrealistic, and this isn't what we're interested in, and this isn't the way the world is. We're trying to help him reach the point where he can go on the outside and deal with things effectively and realistically, but there still has to be opportunities. I think the type of opportunities that are realistic, I don't think we should offer these kids things that they're not either prepared for or motivated for or realistic about. And in many instances, a good many youngsters are not realistic about the world of work, certainly, their expectations, their lack of familiarity with it, make it a very difficult thing for them. But I think we have to offer them the training, the vocational training, the opportunities in the world of work, the opportunity really to reach these goals towards which they aspire. If a boy realistically aspires towards a goal which we set forth as one towards which youngsters should aspire in our middle-class world, it has to be available to him. The obstacles in his path should be no more nor perhaps any less than they are with other youngsters who are not as disadvantaged.
But jobs are scarce if you're young, non-white, and from the slums, and those that are available usually have no future. Bobby's going home, but for every boy like him who's lucky enough to get some help, there are hundreds still out on the streets or marking time in training schools, and the situation is getting worse, not better. The dropout rate continues to grow, and jobs for these boys are getting harder to find. Our tendency in fighting the crime problem is to ask for better police protection. But that's only a temporary solution. In the long run, the answer to the crime problem is education, better community services, and meaningful job opportunities. It will be costly, but not nearly as costly as the price we now pay for crime in the streets.
This is NET, the National Educational Television Network.